everyone, Unforgiven here with another GIMP tutorial. Today we'll be demonstrating how to create an outer space sci-fi type of image. And to do so, we'll just need to open up our GIMP program. If you do not already have it, it is a free open source program and can be downloaded from GIMP.org. And if you already have it downloaded and installed on your computer, simply open up the program and you should see something similar to what I have here. And for today's tutorial, we will start by coming up to File and New to create a new image. And for the width and height, we are going to set these at 1920 by 1080. This is standard size for a high definition or 16:9 ratio screen. And once you have this opened up here, the background, I want to change the color from from white to black. To do so, I'm going to come over to my toolbox and select my bucket fill tool. And I want to change this top color here to black. And I can do so by simply clicking right below in the corner with this black and white swatch. And it will automatically change my colors back to black and white. And ensuring my foreground color is black, I'm going to simply click on the image. Once you have that blackened out, for our next step, the next thing we want to do is add in some stars and make our starry background. Alright, to do so, the first thing we're going to want to do is come up to Filters, Noise, HSV Noise. And for those of you that do not know, HSV is your hue, your saturation, and your value. It will bring up the HSV dialog box. And in here we're going to come down to the bottom of the box for the value, and we're going to drag this all the way up to a value of 255. And for this size of image, I am going to drop this down to about 253. As you can see, each time I click there, it kind of expands the amount of the stars in there, so they're not quite as packed in and condensed. And I am going to increase the holdness to 4. And this will just give me a little noise in the background. So once we have put those values in, we're just going to click OK. And you'll notice now we have some really faint little dots here. Varying sizes for distant stars. The next thing we want to do is we want to add in another layer of stars, and these are going to be a little closer. So to do so, we're going to come up top to Filters and Light and Shadow, Sparkle. Now this dialog box comes up. We're not going to change any of the values. We're going to leave these as default and just simply click OK. And now you'll notice we have all these different varying size stars that are a lot closer. But if you'll notice, and I'll zoom in just a little bit here, a lot of them have these spokes that come out, and some of them are just a little too bright. So to kind of even this entire background out, there's actually two other steps we're going to do that will complete our starry background here. The first of which is to actually take out the spokes and some of the brightness of these stars, and we'll do so by coming over to our Layers dialog box and selecting Create a New Layer. And since we have a foreground color of black already, and I want this layer that I'm creating to be black, I am going to select my foreground color, leaving the width and the size alone, and clicking OK. Now, on that layer, I am going to come up to Filters, Render, Clouds, Difference Clouds. You will get the Solid Noise dialog box. And here there's no reason to change anything. You can leave all values as default. However, you can play around in here. It will just change, slightly randomly change the amount and the places where the stars will actually be showing through a little more so than others. This, what we're basically doing is we're creating a sort of a layer mask, whereas once we lay this in, the stars, any of the stars that fall into the darker areas, the darker the area is, the less the star will shine through, and the opposite is for the lighter the area. So we're just going to simply click OK and leave all the values alone. Okay, now if you'll notice, this has completely covered up our stars. So to actually have it create the effect we want and have our stars come through or shine through, we are going to change the mode of this layer from normal to burn. And I'll zoom in just momentarily here, and if you'll notice, now that we have done that, we've taken off most of the outer spokes that were coming out, as well as some of the extra brightness that was around. It looks a little bit more like a starry night. There's just one other thing we want to do to kind of make these stars pop, and that's to add in a little bit of color. To do that, we want to come again over to our Layers dialog box and create a new layer. This time we want to use white and click OK. Come up to Filters, Render, Clouds, Plasma, and you will get the Plasma dialog box. And once again, in here you can leave the values as default and simply click OK. However, you can also increase and decrease the amount of turbulence, and this will just rearrange the color that is on the screen here, on the preview screen here, as you can see. And this is where the different colors will be coming through into the stars. So sometimes, especially on a larger image like I'm doing, the more turbulence you add, the more the colors are combined into each other or scrunched up. If you spread it out by lowering the turbulence down further, you really tend to have one whole section or one corner that's blue, and one corner that's green, one red, one yellow. And to keep away from that, we're trying to blend colors in kind of everywhere. So I'll put that back on the default of 1, and I'm just going to click OK. Alright, now you'll see we've created a nice colored layer here, but once again we have to do something to it so that our stars will shine through. So we are going to come over into our Layers dialog box and change the mode from normal to dodge. So again, I'll zoom in here and kind of pan around, and you can see we have a little difference in colors, some blues and reds, and some greens, yellows, just color thrown all throughout. So it looks a little more realistic, like you're looking at a night sky or maybe out the window of a spacecraft. And that basically kind of concludes the background or starry night portion of this image. Now for the next part, we'll be creating a planet, and to do that we'll want to come over into our Layers and dialog box and create a new layer. This time we want to set the fill type to transparency, and we want to change the width and the height. I definitely want to lower these down. You can really put in whatever values you wish, as long as they are matching. We do want this to be a completely square layer here. So I'm going to make a planet about 700 by 700 and click OK. And you'll notice this is about the size of swatch it's going to give me to work with. But after creating this, you can always resize your layer to make it larger or smaller to fit your needs. Alright, now to start with, for this type, there's many different ways to actually go about creating something that will look really cool in the end. The easiest and most simplest way to begin with would be to come into your toolbox and select your bucket fill tool and come on to your foreground color. and click once. It will bring up your color palette, and just pick a color, any color you want. It really doesn't matter. It's just, this is going to be one of the main colors of your planet. And I think we'll go with a nice little blue color. Just simply click OK to put that color as our foreground. And once again, making sure our bucket fill tool is selected, and coming below into our tool options, the fill hole selection is checked. We're going to come into the box layer we have created here and click one time. And we've now filled that area in with the light blue. Now, before we go actually rendering this into a planet, if we were to do it now, we would basically have a blank pool ball. So we were going to add in just a little more color and effect here to kind of make it look a little more like a planet. And to do so, we're going to come over into the toolbox and select our paintbrush tool. And I'm going to come down to the foreground color and click to bring up my color palette once again to change the color. And what I'm going to be adding here is in the end going to look like clouds. So I kind of want a little bit of a grayish type of color. Tends to come out a little better. Just click OK once you have your color selected. Now I have my paintbrush tool selected, and I'm going to come over into my brushes dialog box where I can choose the style of brush I wish to use. And for the clouds, I believe I am going to use acrylic number 2. And if I'll raise the size of this up, and you can see kind of the size, the shape of the brush here. And with the opacity set at about 50%, I am just going to come over onto the layer we've just created and colored in, and just simply draw around randomly. I'm going to leave some small patches of blue that kind of stick through, and other places I'm going to completely cover over. Now, that's just a general effect, and from here we can turn this into a sphere, and it will actually look a lot like a planet. So to do so, once you have added in any color that you wish to add in, like I said, this kind of simulates clouds. To turn this into a sphere, we're going to come up to Filters, Map, Map Object, and you will get your Map to Object dialog box. Once this pops up, you can uncheck the Show Wireframe and check the Update Preview Live button. That way we can see exactly what we're doing here as we're going along through these settings. And the wireframe, it just kind of gets it out of the way so you can actually see a little better. Now, our first tab here for options, we're going to want to map to sphere and check the transparent background. And that's about all we'll need to do for the first tab. So we'll come over to the second tab over, which is light. If you'll notice, there's a nice bright spot of light right here. And if we were creating some sort of ball, pool ball of orb or some sort, we might want to use this. But since we're creating a planet, we can actually add in our own light source coming from a sun or another bright star. So we're going to want to get rid of any of this bright little spot here. So we'll do so by coming over and changing our light source type from point to directional. We're going to leave our color alone and change to the next tab, which is material, and set the values for ambient to 0 and specular to 0 as well. If you'll notice, this has now taken all of the glare off of the globe. And then come over to the last tab for orientation. And in here, the only thing we're going to want to play around with and mess with is the position on the Z-axis. which will control actually the size of the planet, and just by scrolling you can see we're changing the size. And I would recommend setting this no higher than 0.9. If you go any higher than that, you do stand the risk of losing the very edges of your planet from top to bottom, left and right. So setting that at 0.9, I'm going to click OK. And we have a nice little planet that we have just now created. Now, I definitely don't want him to stay right where he is. That is my male planet, I guess. So I'm going to come into my toolbox and select my Move tool. And simply by hovering over the planet we have just created, I'm going to click and drag it into position. I think I'm going to have him kind of hang out about there. Okay, now I will show you guys how to create one other style of planet here. I will create a moon to go along with our planet that we have created, and then I'll finish it and wrap this tutorial up with some supernovas possibly in the background, just to keep this short. And you can kind of take the techniques that I have shown within this tutorial and play around with them and expand on them on your own and create a really nice background. So to create a moon, and this is actually another style to create a planet as well, we are going to come into our layers dialog box and create a new layer. We're going to set the layer fill type to transparency, and the width and the height, since I'm creating a moon, I want it rather small. So I'm actually going to put it at 100 by 100 and click OK. Now for this one, since it is a moon and it's going to have virtually no real color to it other than differences in your black and whites, I am going to select my blend tool from my toolbox. I'm going to ensure that my foreground and background colors are set to black and white, and that my gradient is set to foreground to background. I'm just going to simply come into the box we have created and click in one corner, dragging to the other corner, and release. And this just gives us a little bit of light to dark shade across the box. Now from here, before we turn this into a planet or a sphere, since it has no clouds, there's no need to add those. However, I would like to add a little bit of texture to this layer, so that when we actually turn it into a planet or a small moon and set it orbiting our planet here, it actually looks like it has a little bit of some craters and whatnot on it. So to do so, I am going to come up top to Filters, Artistic, Clothify. This is actually one of my favorite filters. I love using this. It's adding texture to my layers. And you can kind of play around with the blur, X and Y values, as well as the depth to get something that will look a little better for you. It really depends on the size of the swatch or layer you're dealing with. And since I am creating a rather small swatch here, I will leave the blur, X and Y values at 9. And I will decrease the depth to about 2. And we'll see what that looks like, and we're going to click OK. Alright. I'm just going to move this down so we can take a better look at what we're doing here. And it looks like that's pretty good. Zooming in, you can see we've added a little bit of texture to our layer. So assuming that's about what you want it to look like and might work for you, we're going to see what that'll look like as a sphere. And we're just going to repeat the process that we did for the planet by coming up top to Filters. And since we have already done this one before, we'll come down to Recently Used and Map Object. And all of our defaults should still be set the same as they were when we created our planet. And the only thing we're going to have to change here is you'll notice the moon we're about to create is really dark, so we'll lighten that up. But we're just going to leave everything default since it's already been changed, and just click OK. I'm going to zoom back out here, and you can see we have a nice moon, but it is just a little bit dark. So to lighten that up, the easiest way to do so would be to come up to Colors, Curves, and you will get your Curves dialog box. And by grabbing just right about in the center and pulling up, sometimes slightly toward the top, and just kind of play around with it. I'll watch the planet as I do this. I'll watch the small changes until I get something that I think looks good. It's not too bad there, and I'm going to click OK. And now I've created a nice little moon. However, there's still the lines on it here, kind of give it a look that I don't really like. So I'm just going to give this a slight blur. However, I do not want the blur to extend beyond the very edges of the globe here. So, but first I'm going to come over to the layer and right click, and I'm going to choose Alpha to Selection. And this will just simply select everything within this small layer that is not transparent. And this will allow me to make any changes I want, and none of the changes will spill over into the transparent areas. So now I'm going to come up top to Filters, Blur, and just blur. Now it's really hard to tell, but I did make a very small change. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to repeat that blur about 3 more times. And I can do so very easily by selecting Filters. And since it was the last filter that we ran, I'm just going to click Repeat Blur. I will do this 2 more times. So altogether, I just blurred that 4 times. It just gives us a slight blur in those dark lines that were on there. And by coming up top to Select and None, and I'll switch over and highlight my background layer. That way the box will disappear out from around the moon. And you can see the basic idea here and what we have done in creating a starry background with a planet with a moon orbiting. Now, like I said, if any of these, you want to make changes to any of these, you can very easily do so. If the size, say this moon, we want this to make this moon a little bit smaller, I would come over into my toolbox, select my scale tool, and for any object I wish to change, I would just hover over it and click. However, since I am on the background, if I do so, it highlights and selects the entire background. So cancel out. And coming into my layers dialog box, I'm going to click on the layer for my moon. And as you change through your layers, you'll notice, since I did not change the layer canvas size to fit the image size for any of these layers we created, as I click through, I can tell which one is actually being highlighted. So I know which one's which, so I don't have to take the time out to label them. That's by selecting the moon, and then we have our perspective, or excuse me, our scale tool selected from our toolbox. I'm going to click on the moon layer, and we get a nice box there. And from here, of course, I can make it much larger, smaller, kind of play around and get it looking exactly like I want. Just hit scale when you're done. Of course, if you were to add in a light, a sun, and you'll notice both of these that we created, it always seems to put the shadow on the lower right half of any sphere that's created. You can just simply use the rotate or transform tools on the individual layers to get them facing how you wish. And the last thing I would like to add into this tutorial, to add into the image here, because we have a lot of open space here that's empty. I'm going to put in some small little bright stars that stick out just a little more than the others. So to do so, I'm going to make sure I am on my background layer in my layers dialog box. And by selecting filters, light and shadow, supernova, and when this box opens up, you can grab any corner and just simply drag and click and drag, excuse me, and make the preview area larger so you can position your supernova exactly where you want it. Now I do want to leave mine slightly in the area that it's already in. I'll move it down just a little. However, by default it does set the radius down here to 20, which is rather large. So for this I am going to change that value to 7. And I want to leave the color as blue. Of course you can change this to any color you wish. Just change the color of the star shining. And I'm going to leave the spokes alone as well. Of course you can change those as well. This will just increase and decrease the amount of light spokes that are coming out from your supernova. And click OK. Now we've created a nice little supernova kind of just hanging out by itself over here in the corner. Of course you can repeat that process and create as many as you wish. Put maybe one more in there, and I'll even change the color. Maybe give us a nice red. And I will change the radius to this one, and I'll drop the value from 7 to about 4. And click OK. And now we have a nice little red star as well that's kind of popping out from the back there. And those are just some basic techniques that you can use to enhance a photo or an image that you're creating here. Any type of outer space image. That does conclude this tutorial for creating a sci-fi outer space theme. I hope this video was informative. Please take a moment to hit the like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week with another video.